Brilliant. Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait for a couple of moments to let people join the webinar, and then we will get started. My colleagues who are on the panel, can you see that there are people now joining? Is that where we're? Perfect. Thank you very much. So let's kick off this morning's webinar without any further ado. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's great to be here today. I'm Kate Adcock. I'm Director of Research at Muscular Dystrophy UK, and we're all here for a fantastic virtual seminar on Becker Muscular Dystrophy, and we'll talk about the experiences of both adults and children today, which is going to be fantastic. We've got a really packed agenda this morning, and a brilliant array of speakers and panelists, and we're going to split the session into two parts. We'll start talking about research, and then we'll move on to talking about living with the condition and various people's experiences and any questions you may have. The opportunity for you to ask questions is within the Q&A function on Zoom. So those who are joining us on the webinar, if you look to the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see the Q&A function, and you can type in your question there. We won't be taking people's questions. You won't be asking them out loud, as it were. If you can type your questions in, that will be brilliant. If we can't answer them today, either because we run out of time or because we don't know the answer, we'll do what we can to put the answers on our website in the coming days. Just before we begin, I just wanted to mention, here is our wonderful array of speakers, which is brilliant. We've got people with lived experience, we've got clinicians, and we've got people who are going to talk to us about research as well, which is just fantastic. Before we begin further, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have a helpline for anyone affected by muscle wasting conditions. So please do contact us if you've got any questions or in need of support. We can either help you by providing information or support you directly. And if we don't have the capacity and the information, we will be able to signpost you to places where you can get support. And as you can see on the screen at the moment, the number and email address is up there. To call us on 0800 652 6352 or email us at info@musculardystrophyuk.org. As I say, that information is there. We are recording this session, and this will be available on YouTube and our website in the next few days. Again, all of this information about how to contact us and get support if you need it will be available through that route. And before we get going, I just would like to thank our sponsor for today, which is PTC Therapeutics. PTC Therapeutics, the company, have sponsored the virtual seminar, but have had no control or influence over the event or the content. So that's all of that introduction. So now I'm going to hand it over to our speakers for the day, which is fantastic. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Hermien from the University of Leiden, or Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands. Her research focuses on developing and applying new magnetic resonance imaging techniques in various different kinds of muscle diseases. And she's going to talk to us today on MRI findings relating to the brain involvement in Becker muscular dystrophy. We're then going to hear from Abby Scott and Professor Michaela Guglieri from the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Centre at Newcastle University, and they're going to talk to us about the BMD Hub project. So this is really fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. And Hermien, over to you to share your slides.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm always a little bit lost where my screen goes, so I think you now are seeing my screen.
Yep.
And you now also see it in full screen mode.
Perfect. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and also thank you for the invitation and the introduction. So I indeed will talk today about brain involvement in Becker muscular dystrophy, and I will focus a lot on MR imaging because that's my expertise. I've given a little introduction on what the talk will look like today. And I need to start my timer because otherwise I know that I will talk for too long. So that's been done. So I will first talk a little bit about brain involvement on a functional level, and on a functional level, I then mean like what happens in everyday life. So I will talk about cognition and behavior in Becker muscular dystrophy. But again, as I'm not a neuropsychologist or behavioral specialist, this will be very short. And then I will focus a lot on my own expertise on how we can look at brain involvement on a structural level. So actually look at the brain itself. Where we commonly do that with MRI. So I will explain a little bit what you need for an MRI scan, what kind of scans can we get from this imaging modality. And I will give an overview of a big EU project that has just finalized past summer, where we did a lot of scans in a lot of patients with Becker muscular dystrophy and also in patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I won't be able to share of the results because we're just done, but then at least you know what is coming and can keep your eye out from that. And I will share some future steps. So if we then turn to brain involvement on a functional level, what you can see in the literature, and I've highlighted a nice review here that was published 2 years ago about the cognitive profile and neuropsychiatric disorders in Becker muscular dystrophy. What you can see is that there is a very wide distribution. So in general, the cognitive aspect is close to normal, but there's a much wider distribution than we can find in the general population. And if there are cognitive problems, this often involves the working memory, the processing speed, and also there are reading problems. And there's also some behavioral problems. So there's ADHD in 1/3 of the children, mostly. And if there are other behavioral problems, this primarily has to do with depression and also with anxiety. As you probably all know, there are different mutations giving rise to Becker muscular dystrophy, and it's unclear at this stage if there's a dependence on the location of the mutation on this cognitive and behavioral profile. We know that this dependence is there in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but we just don't know yet in Becker. And that's also one of the things we could possibly study in the big EU BIND project. There have also been reports that patients grow out of their deficit, which basically means that the problems are more prominent in childhood, where there's a wide range also in school level, for instance, but when patients go older, that they actually grow out of this deficit. But again, it's a big disclaimer. I only found like less than 15 articles on the behavioral and cognition, and that is a small subset, basically, a small set of articles. So there's a lot of research needed into this area. So what can we do if we want to look at the structural level? And also here, I want to start with a disclaimer that if we look at brain structure, and for instance, we see differences in brain volume or other things, that does not necessarily mean that somebody with a smaller brain also has a lower cognition, right? In muscle, it's the case. If you have a very big muscle, it's usually very strong. If you have a very big brain, it doesn't mean that you are very smart, right? So that's a disclaimer that I want to make beforehand, because it can sometimes be confusing. So how do we measure brain involvement on a structural level with MRI? So I'm not sure how many of you have had an MRI, probably several of you due to the cardiac involvement, but what is it actually? What do we do with magnetic resonance imaging? Well, what's in a name, right? Magnetic resonance. So we're measuring in a very big magnet. So the MRI, this is the MRI scanner. It has a very strong magnetic field, and strong then means, for instance, 3 Tesla or 1.5 Tesla, and 3 Tesla basically means 52,000 times the Earth magnetic field, right? So it's really strong. So what do we also need? We also need an antenna to receive the signal. So that's that's the big red arrow here, which points to the coil, which is here. So this is a head coil. So you're basically placed into the scanner with your head inside the coil, and then you move into the big tube. So you move basically into the MRI scanner. And because the signals that we receive are very small, we want this antenna to be as close to the tissue as possible. So that's why you need this close-fitting thing around your head. So we are very sensitive to receive signal. So if we would measure the heart, we would place a coil on the chest. If we would measure the muscles, we would place the coil, a different type of coil, on your legs or on your arms. So what can we do with this? And we also need headphones against the noise, because if we want to know where the signal comes from in the brain or in the body, we need something which is called gradients, and the switching of these gradients makes a lot of noise, and we want to protect your ears against the noise. And we can also play music if you can still hear it over the noise. So what do we do with these types of scans? Well, we can look into the brain, and that's really basically what got me hooked on this technique. Not only the brain, but also the muscles, but that you can actually look inside the body without having to stick a needle in. Right? In the muscle, we can still stick a needle in the brain, you don't really want to do that. But still, you can have a view on what's going on inside without any radiation, without having to open up the body. So what do we see then? Well, this is a slice through the brain, so we can see the nose here at the front, and this is basically the back of the head. We can see the skull here, or actually you don't see the skull, because on MRI you don't see the skull, but you see the subcutaneous fat surrounding the skull, and this is what we see here is the brain, basically, and you see something which is grayish, which is called the gray matter, and this is actually where all the the brain cells are. And here there's also a part called the white matter, and that's where the big connections between all the cells are. So this is a transverse slice of the same brain, where we can also see the ears here on the side. We can see the eyes at the front, and here we can also see the nose, or actually we see a big cavity, which is the air which is in the nose. So we see the gray matter, we see the white matter, and we see all types of different structures in the brain. And to just show you a little bit how far we've gotten with this technique, or where we came from. So this is a prototype 0.15 Tesla scanner from Philips. So again, remembering we're now scanning at 3 Tesla, but this was in the 1980s. We had a 0.15 Tesla scanner, and these were the images that we were looking at. So it's very grainy, right? People then were really happy. Right now, we would basically say, try again. This image is not very good. And now, or actually in 2015, so this is a 7 Tesla MRI scanner, so it's even a higher field. And you can really clearly see that you can see all types of different structures in the brain. And all these different structures in the brain have different roles in cognition and behavior, in memory, in emotion, all these kind of things. So we can really nicely separate out all the different aspects of the brain. So what kind of things can we measure then? So the advantage of if you have somebody inside the scanner, we can actually make different types of scans that also tell us about the different aspects of the brain. So not only where these different parts of the brain are, but also a little bit on what they do. So one of the main things that you first do is make a structural MRI, as we call it, and then you look at brain volume. And as I mentioned, you can look at different cell types. So you can look at gray matter and white matter. And the only reason that these cell types are called gray matter and white matter is because they look gray and they look white, right? There's not a lot more to it than that. And these type of scans have been done, not so much in Becker Muscular Dystrophy, so we don't know. So the BIND project will really be the first study to tell us if there's anything known, if there are any changes in volume. We know in patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy that they have a reduced gray matter, and that if those patients have used daily deflazacort on a daily basis, if we compare those to patients who have had prednisone on a 10-day on, 10-day off schedule, that they have a stronger reduction in gray matter. But again, volume doesn't say anything about cognition or behavior, right? So that's a disclaimer here. We also, of course, know that Becker patients often do not take corticosteroids, and we don't know what the influence is of this corticosteroid use on the gray matter reduction that we saw. So that's all still left to be seen, left to be studied. Then the other thing that we can do is called DTI, and then we look at structural connectivity. And structural connectivity is it basically means that we're looking at the highways of the brain. So if you would compare all the cities in England or in the Netherlands where I am, all these cities are connected with highways, and we're basically looking at how fast or how intact those highways are. And I've entered a little schematic here. So this is an astrocyte and a oligocyte. So these names don't really matter, but these are all the different types of brain cells that there are in the brain. This is a neuron, and a neuron is always connected through a very long line, basically, very long highway to another neuron. And we're basically measuring how the water moves in these different areas. And you can imagine that if water is in a very confined space, so a car is on a highway, it doesn't have a lot of freedom to move. While if a water molecule is here outside of those highways, it can move all over. So that property is basically what we're using in DTI. And also there, we don't know in Becker yet if this is affected or not. And we know that it's altered in patients with DMD. And this is how such an image would look like. So this is a raw image, as we would call it. So that's how we collect it from the scanner. And in an analyzed image, you can see these different colors basically denote the directions of the highways. So where they are going, whether it's up and down, front to back, or left to right. Another thing we can look at is the perfusion. So the perfusion of the brain basically tells us how much blood is flowing through the brain. And because blood is delivering oxygen and glucose, so sugar, to the brain, that tells us how efficient the brain can be in delivering the energy to the different parts of the brain. So such a scan would look like this, where you can see that in the gray matter, so the gray matter was always on the sides, so that's where the muscle cells are, so that's where all the blood is going. Well, there's much less blood actually going to those highways, because it's a highway, they don't really need all the blood. The cells is what they need. The cells are the ones that need the blood. Again, we don't know yet in Becker what's going on. And we know that in patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, this is severely reduced, about 70%. So it's quite a bit. And that's independent of the cardiac involvement in the patients. So the last type of scan that we did is called functional MRI. And now it can get confusing, right? Because I said that with MRI, we can only look at structure and not at function. Well, in the beginning, we said we look at function with cognition and with behavior. But there is a technique which is called functional MRI. And there we actually look at brain activity. So what do? We look basically at different parts of the brain if blood is flowing there at the same time, where we assume that if different parts of the brain have a lot of blood going there at the same time, they are connected. So if the lights go on in two different cities at the same time, apparently there's a football match going on between those two cities. That's basically the analogy, right? So we're looking at connections, at functional connections. And there have actually been some studies in patients with Becker muscular dystrophy, basically connected to the tadalafil trials in Denmark. And there they showed that there was an altered somatosensory response in Becker muscular dystrophy. And here again, we know that in Duchenne, functional MRI patterns are disturbed. So I don't really want to leave you with that we don't know anything yet, without showing you a little bit of promise what we actually have done over the past 4 years. There was a big EU project, BIND project, which started in 2020, just before the COVID pandemic. And there we planned to obtain all these types of scans. So we obtained structural scans, structural connectivity scans, perfusion scans, and functional MRI scans, both in humans and in mice. And what we then first wanted to do is basically we needed to show that if we obtain all these types of scans at different sites across Europe, because we wanted to have a big cohort of patients, we needed to show that those scanners were actually comparable. That if you take an image in Copenhagen, which is a site that participated, and in Rome, and in Leiden, in London, and in Newcastle, we actually get the same results. And that was really important to do. So we asked 6 healthy volunteers to travel to all these different sites and then analyze their data. And what you can see in this graph is that the total brain volume is on the y-axis and all the different subjects are on the x-axis. And you can actually see that the dots from one subject are very close together. So you can see that the travel head, that's how we call them, the brain of travel head number 1 has a lot more volume compared to the brain of travel head number 3. But if we scan that same healthy volunteer at all the different sites, we get very similar results. So that's very encouraging, because that means that we can combine the data of all the different sites together. So how many patients did we scan in the end? Well, we scanned a total of 46 Duchenne patients and 33 controls. And for the Becker patients, we have 53 and also 52 age-matched controls. And that's really the biggest cohort that has ever been scanned for patients with Becker muscular dystrophy. And we also scanned, like I said, the 6 travel heads at all the different sites. So what is new in this project? Well, it has never been, the data from the mouse and the man have never been linked together. Basically, any scan on a Becker patient is new at this stage. So we're really working hard to analyze these data and try to disseminate them and put them out in the public domain as fast as we can. We have advanced structural connectivity, advanced fMRI, and what we definitely will also do is link with the neuropsychology and behavior, because we want to understand if we find differences between controls and patients living with Becker muscular dystrophy, on a structural level, you want to know what that means in neuropsychology and behavior, because that's what patients are suffering from every day. So what is the status of this project? Well, the mouse data are basically ready for publication. We have checked, we did a quality control for all the human data, and they are ready for the analysis. And over the next few months, thanks for the help by MD UK and also 3 other parent projects, we've been able to appoint a postdoc who will do all the analysis and who's already worked on the BIND project for the past 3 years. So she has a lot of experience, and she will perform the MRI analysis. She will, of course, make the data publicly available, so they will go to the Duchenne Data Foundation platform. She will link the data of neuropsychology and behavior, and of course, publish and disseminate the results. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, all the patients, of course, for participating, my team and the BIND team, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. That's been really fantastic. As someone who used to work in a laboratory that was carrying out MRI, it's great to see these studies now being carried out for people who've got muscle conditions and neuropsychology and the behavioral aspects. And I also love the idea of traveling heads. I'm hoping they had bodies attached to them, because that otherwise is really freaky.
Yeah, no, they did. I know the name is weird.
I'm just going to say to the people who've joined on the webinar, please do put any questions into the Q&A function at the bottom. We'll hear from Michaela and Abby from Newcastle, and then we'll take some questions in the round. But again, thank you, Hermien, so much. That's been really, really fantastic so far. No pressure then on Michaela and Abby. Abby, if you're going to share your screen, and I think Michaela is going to talk first.
Yes, I'll share that now.
Perfect.
And we will actually completely change topic and much more less scientific for that perspective. But we just wanted to share with you an initiative that we have developed within the John Walter Muscular Dystrophy Research Center in collaboration with patient organization in order to promote let's say clinical research in Becker muscular dystrophy. So I'm Michela Guglieri, and as already mentioned, I work at the John Walter Muscular Dystrophy Research Center in Newcastle, and with me I will have Abby Scott, who is the project manager for the project that I'm going to present. This is the BMD Hub, and BMD obviously stands for Becker Muscular Dystrophy, and as I mentioned, it's a collaboration between the Newcastle University and the patient organization, including MD UK. The project is being funded by Edgewise, that is a pharmaceutical company that is currently developing therapeutic approaches for Becker muscular dystrophy and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And the project has really been developed following the successful experience of the Duchenne muscular dystrophy hub, which was a collaboration between Newcastle University and Duchenne UK. Next slide, Abby. So, but what is the Becker Muscular Dystrophy Hub and what we aim to achieve with this project? First of all, is really to try to create a, let's say, more awareness about Becker Muscular Dystrophy in the patient community as well as the clinician community. So we really want to build a network of clinicians and other healthcare professionals who take care of pediatric and adult patients with Becker muscular dystrophy around implementation of care as well as research opportunity. The last few years has seen an increased number of clinical research projects and clinical trials specifically focused on Becker muscular dystrophy. And this is really a step forward. As you know, we have several years of experience in other neuromuscular conditions, including Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but it's really the first time when we see an increased number of clinical trials directed to make a difference for patients with Becker muscular dystrophy. So what the BMD Hub wants to achieve is provide, first of all, a reliable source of information about ongoing clinical research and clinical trial, not only in the UK, but worldwide. We also, again, learning from the experience in other neuromuscular diseases, we wanted to make sure that when research comes in the UK, there is a a fair and accessible system to allow patients to take part in research, regardless where they live and where they're coming from. Quite often, clinical trials, due to their complexity, are performed only in selected clinical centers, and usually in a very small number of highly specialized neuromuscular centers. And we had the feedback from patients that feel that it's unfair that depending on where you live, you have a more or less opportunity to take part in research. On the other hand, for the clinical trial side, identify patients that meet specific inclusion criteria for clinical trial can be difficult. So Abby will present the CRD, that is a specific database that aim to collect information about patients with Becker muscular dystrophy who are interested in clinical research. And there is a nationally coordinated database which hopefully will facilitate the participation to research to patients across the country. With the BMD Hub, we also want to build a network of sites and therefore increase the capacity within the UK to bring clinical trial and clinical research initiative focus on Becker muscular dystrophy and make the UK an attractive place for company as well for academic to conduct research in this specific condition. But we cannot implement research and clinical trial if we do not also implement care. So as part of the aims of the Becker Muscular Dystrophy Hub is to coordinate and harmonize care in Becker Muscular Dystrophy across the country and work towards the development of standardized care recommendation for specific for BMD. Next slide. Although the project is coordinated by the John Walter Muscular Dystrophy Research Center, there are a lot of people that are involved in this project and help us to identify the direction to take forward. And these are all the members of the steering committee, where we try to include clinicians who take care of patients with pediatric and adult patients with Becker muscular dystrophy, as well as patient and patient organizations. Next slide. As part of the BMD Hub, we have developed a website that was launched in February this year, and really is a resource for patient and the clinician community to try to collect reliable and up-to-date information about Becker muscular dystrophy, care, provision, clinical center and clinical trial site, as well as clinical trial and clinical research initiative. The BMD Hub website hosts the BMD Clinical Trial Finder and the BMD Central Recruitment Database. Next slide. The BMD Clinical Trial Finder, here is the link if you want to have a look. Again, it's based on extrasexual experience in Duchenne muscular dystrophy and is a source of reliable and up-to-date information on existing and upcoming clinical trials specific for Becker muscular dystrophy in the UK and worldwide. And has really been developed with the idea to allow patients as well as clinicians to find a accessible website to make sure to be informed about ongoing research projects. The information are directly collected from the sponsor of clinical trials, from the academic involved in research, but also from the clinical trial side, and is coordinated by the BMD Hub management team based in Newcastle. And I hope that if you look into that, you will agree with me that has been developed to be really accessible and patient-friendly, so where the information are provided in a easy and quick way, but are accurate. And I think that I then pass to Abby, who will introduce the concept of the BMD Hub Central Recruitment Database.
Thank you, Michaela. So I am the project manager for the BMD Hub. So I basically run everything in the background of the BMD Hub and handle all requests to the Central Recruitment Database. As Michaela said, the Central Recruitment Database, also known as the CRD, was launched along with the website in February of this year. It's a coordinated database for people in the UK with BMD who want to express their potential, their preferences for potential participation in research studies in the UK. The aim of the CRD is to provide fairer access to clinical trials and studies for those with BMD. and trial and study sites can use the CRD to locate eligible participants. I'll just run through the process on the side of the patient. It's quite a simple process that doesn't take too long. So anyone interested in taking part in a clinical trial or study in BMD can sign up to the CRD online. The person registering, if the participant is over the age of 16, they can register themselves. However, if they're below 16, it's a parent or guardian or carer who can register the participant. Registration is open to everyone in the UK with a confirmed diagnosis of BMD. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't accept users from outside of the UK. This is just for UK trials only. Once a patient has created an account online, they can use the account to update their information regularly. They will then be asked to complete a questionnaire. The questionnaire will ask for things such as personal details, diagnosis, motor function, medication, and study preferences. And it'll take around 20 to 30 minutes to complete. It can be saved and returned to or updated at a later date. So don't worry if you don't have all the information to hand. Once the patient has completed the questionnaire, the project team will then source. Well, if we do ask that, preferably the patient upload their own genetic report or genetic letter which confirms their diagnosis. However, we're aware that not everyone holds this themselves. So if not, the project team will then reach out to the clinic that is stated and try and source this genetic report. A patient can't be recommended for a study or a trial unless we do have a genetic report to confirm their diagnosis. So registration isn't complete until this has been sourced. So once the genetic report is sourced, their patient's profile is complete, and if they're matched to a study or a trial, they'll be contacted directly by a research study site. On signing up to a CRD, there is no guarantee that someone will be selected for trial or study participation. It fully depends on their eligibility for the trials that come up. On the side of us, when we process a request, so initially, if a trial site wants to recruit patients, they complete a request form. And each trial or study can have multiple sites, and each site must submit a request form individually. So this can happen at any time once a study starts recruiting. Every request must then be approved by our BMD Hub Steering Committee, which Michaela mentioned previously. And once approved, the request is then processed by the CRD manager, which at the moment is me. We then use the form to identify eligible patients who fit the study criteria. If there are more eligible patients than required by the site, we'll use a randomization tool to try and make the process of selection as fair as possible. So we're not identifying patients based on our preferences or anything. It's a totally random and fair process. Once a patient has been identified, the sites are sent a patient information pack with all the information on that patient that they require. From here, the site will then reach out to the patient's local care clinic to discuss and confirm whether that patient is in fact eligible for the study. If eligible, the patient will be contacted by the study site. Patients always have the option to decline taking part in the study. So if a site did reach out and a patient didn't want to take part in that, but didn't want to take part in that study, or that study was perhaps too far away or not at a good time for that patient to participate, they're perfectly fine to decline taking part, and you'll just be put back into a pool of patients on the CRD and could be contacted at a later date for a different study. If a patient is happy to take part in a study, they'll then undergo screening by the site before any kind of study participation begins. There's also the chance that once the trial site has discussed the patient with their local clinic that they're not actually eligible for the site, they won't be contacted, and once again they'll be put back into the pool of people to be selected. Each trial site is also required to feed back to the BMD hub on the referral outcome, so that we know that if someone has been selected, or we can mark it on their profile to know that they're currently involved in a study, or if they haven't, they can once again be put back into a pool of patients. And that's all we have for today. So if you do, we will be taking questions after this, but if you do have any queries, feel free to email us or phone us, or obviously there's a postal address there. This QR code links directly to the CRD, so feel free to scan that and have a look at the website and sign up if you wish to be part of a trial or study. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Abby, and thank you, Michaela, for your questions. Abby, if you could stop sharing your screen, that would be fantastic. And just to let people know, it's a little bit buried on our website at the minute, but we also have a link to the BMD hub from the muscular dystrophy research pages on our website. So again, if you're looking for it, you know what, Uncle Google does a really good job of finding it too. So, you know, it's very easy to find, which is brilliant. And there's so much information. It's a really great site. We've had some questions through the Q&A function, so we're going to kick off with those. First of all, just to you, Hermien, somebody pointed out, also asked the question around MRIs, and is it safe to have an MRI if you have a pacemaker?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a very relevant question.
Mm-hmm.
So for research, so I'm going to separate between clinic and research here. So for research, we would not do an MRI with a pacemaker, just because you potentially need to change things to the pacemaker in order to get the scan. And research is always voluntarily, so we're not going to do it. For clinic, so if you need to get a clinical MRI, especially the newer pacemakers, there are ways where you can get an MRI. So older pacemakers had severe contraindications, but these days people know much better what they are doing, and pacemakers have been made in a way that they can go into the MRI safely. So you have to adapt the protocol. You might have to switch off the pacemaker or change something to the settings. So it can be done. So the short answer is it depends on your pacemaker, and talk to your doctor, I guess, if it can be done.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's a really important question, actually, isn't it? That people, MRIs have that sort of slight worry about any implants and things. So that's really great. So thank you for answering that one. Michaela and Abby, these questions probably more for you. One of them is around the genetic reports, or a couple actually relate to that. Would a GP, if the person themselves doesn't have their genetic report, do you think the GP would have it? Would that be the best place to go try and source it from?
It's very difficult because depending on where you live, sometimes the GP might have your genetic report, but in order to get your genetic report, it's always better to go back to your neurologist or neuromuscular specialist. They usually always have a copy of your genetic report, and you are entitled to request a copy of your genetic report, but it's not something that in the UK is routinely given to the patient at the time of diagnosis. If you can't get it, Abby will be able to get in touch with your neuromuscular clinician and chase it, but it's always easier if you do it first.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. And someone's commented that their son had been diagnosed as a child with as having Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so DMD, but had a later sort of re-diagnosis, if you like, to Becker muscular dystrophy, because he was able to continue walking for a much longer time than would be anticipated for somebody with Becker muscular dystrophy. Would they need to be further kind of tested, perhaps a further genetic test again or something, before they could be involved in clinical trials, do you think?
These really depend on the mutation and on clinical trials. So clinical trial, and probably there was another question about the clinical trials. So clinical trials have a specific inclusion and exclusion criteria. And I give a little bit of the rationale behind this. Clinical trial, usually if we talk about new drugs, want to show whether a drug is effective. So make a difference if patient take the drug or doesn't take the drug. And the drug might be effective to everyone, but the clinical trial need to measure that effect in a certain period of time that is the duration of the study. And then is when they select a population that is more likely to give you the answer in that specific time frame or using a specific outcomes. And that is why we have inclusion-exclusion criteria. So once the drug is approved, is a completely different story, because it's the clinician to make the call about this patient has Becker muscular dystrophy and therefore should be eligible. So depending on the type of mutation, you might be eligible for some for clinical trials, and it's unlikely that you will require additional testing. In some cases, you might require a muscle biopsy to document that there is some dystrophin, which is what makes the difference from a pathological point of view, whether you have Duchenne or Becker muscular dystrophy. But again, I think that it's important to have the copy of the genetic report and register anyway. If the clinical diagnosis is Becker muscular dystrophy, register anyway on the BMD CRD and discuss with your clinician whether there is whether you meet the criteria for the current clinical trial, and they will probably be the best one to inform about this.
Fantastic, thank you. There's a I think a glimmer of hope here. Somebody's just said that they were diagnosed 40 years ago and their consultant was able to find their genetic information. So hurrah, that's brilliant news. That's really good.
The system sometimes works.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I think that we've talked about the clinical trials, and it's fantastic that there are clinical trials going on and that there are clinical trials going on in the UK. But some of the studies that are also part of the BMD hub are more about kind of just collecting what we call natural history data. And Michaela, maybe you could tell us a little bit about why that is also important. Why, you know, even if it's not part of a trial where someone is taking a drug, that's still an important aspect of the whole ecosystem, if you like.
Yeah, I think that actually Hermien well introduced this concept, and it was specific for the brain, but applied to generally the course of Becker muscular dystrophy. Becker muscular dystrophy, and probably all of you on this call are the best example for this, is a very what we call heterogeneous condition, so can be very different from one patient to another. And how does it present and how does it change over time? So the progression of the symptom significantly change from one person to another. And these make the Becker muscular dystrophy much more difficult to study in terms of thinking about intervention that can change the natural course of the disease and can therefore be of benefit for patient. In order to allow us to, so clinical trial, when we want to test a new drug, as I mentioned, we want to see if a new drug can be beneficial to patient. In order to measure the benefit to patient, I really need to demonstrate whether a patient to take the drug and a patient does not take the drug make a difference. And unfortunately, I never have two copies of the same person. So I can't have a two copy and I give to the same person and not give it to the same person and see the effect. So how do we measure is to take a large group of patients, giving the drug and see whether the one that received the drug different from the one that do not receive the drug. Having an understanding about what do we expect on the disease without intervention will therefore help us to design a clinical trial to test a new drug. The other important thing about natural history in Becker muscular dystrophy is that Becker muscular dystrophy is not only a muscle condition. We know that there is the brain involvement, we know that there is the heart involvement, but again, we have very limited data, and it's very difficult to plan care, so to address an accurate care and advance the care recommendation if we do not know the details of this more complex implication. And that is why I always present the initiative is important, clinical trials are important, and obviously aim to make a difference to patient, but the natural history study is a great contribution for patient to advance the field.
It's an opportunity, I suppose, for patients to have a little bit more contact with clinical teams as well, and presumably potentially hear about clinical trials and things that are going on, sort of rather than seeing on websites and things. You can actually hear directly from clinical teams about exciting developments in the field, which is also kind of great,
And
I think.
inevitably, when we do the natural history, we are really looking into the details of how the condition manifests. And therefore, quite often, they always said is a very nice way to have access to great care.
Yeah, perfect. Somebody here, link it a little bit to questions about, age restrictions. Do you think that older people with Becker muscular dystrophy, so say over 50, would be involved in clinical trials at all going forward?
There are age limitations. Usually, actually, Becker muscular dystrophy are a little bit broader. So patients with age 50 can definitely take part even in ongoing clinical trials. It really depends on the clinical trial and what is the question, what is the mechanism of action of the drug that is tested or the intervention that is tested. And the important thing is that I always want to emphasize clinical trial obviously is opening hopes and emphasize the progress in terms of the interest to try to make, to find a new treatment for a condition, but always test the drug. And when we do a clinical trial, we do not know if the drug is working or not. So the first priority is that the drug is safe. So sometimes some cohort or some patients are excluded because we want to make sure that if there is any safety concern, we do not cause any damage in a sense. Quite often, for example, in the new clinical trial, intervention, natural history is different, but intervention also, the very young population are excluded. And then we know because the younger patient with BMD tend to be much more stable from a muscle point of view during the first year, and therefore are much more difficult to study or to be used to evaluate the effect of a drug.
Fantastic, thank you. There's a question here that's just come through. Someone's son was diagnosed as a baby and they didn't receive a genetic report. He's now 35 and hasn't been walking since the age of 24. At the diagnosis, they were told that he had high levels of something, but it was a long time ago, and presumably one of those moments where you get given an awful lot of information and you don't remember all of the detail, which is totally understandable, because there's an overload of new facts. The person saying that I assume it's a lady, her father and 2 uncles had BMD and they are a manifesting carrier. Question is, are there different levels of severity of BMD? Report show this? What does the genetic report show? Sorry, Michaela, I think this is another one for you.
I'm more than happy. I don't want to step back on anyone. So let's say that, as I mentioned, Becker muscular dystrophy is a very variable or heterogeneous condition. So we have, and the extreme, I can put in an example in Newcastle, probably the youngest one that we had is after birth, really a baby that was diagnosed with Becker of manifesting symptom before the age of 5. And we have I think that he's now 82-year-old man with Becker muscular dystrophy that was only diagnosed at the age of 65, and everything in the middle. So it's a very, very variable. I have to say that we do not fully understand this variability. We know that some deletion in the dystrophin gene are associated with a milder presentation. So based on the mutation, we can say which patients are more likely to develop early symptoms and a more progressive condition compared to other, and whether they have a higher or lower risk to have, for example, heart problem. But this is not applicable to everyone, so are really specific circumstances. And there are several other factors that determine that variability. And that is why we also see patients within the same family presenting with a completely different presentation. What we are is not just one gene. There are a lot of other genes that influence what the dystrophin gene does, and this seems to be one of the components. There are other, what we do, our lifestyle, our environment, our development can have an influence. There is definitely just much more than simply the change in the dystrophin gene that determine what we present with.
I often think of, it's probably a bit of an old-fashioned view now, but sort of like those big desks you see in front of a record producer's studio with like lots of graphic equalizer, lots of levers that go up and down, little sliders. And I suspect that we're all like that. We've all got some things that kind of go up, some things that kind of go down. And so that can mean that even if you have got the same genetic changes, from one person to another, you could actually have quite different presentation because you've got other things going on in your body, as you say, Michaela, we're not just one gene, which answers probably a question that just came in as well about the person's brother and son have the same deletion, but they present very differently. So that sort of speaks to that experience. I am very conscious of the fact that we have got some other fantastic people on the panel, and Michaela and Hermien and Abby, thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you, but let's bring everybody else in because there's so much that everyone else can say, I'm sure. So we will move now to the rest of the panel, and I will get everyone to introduce themselves, and I'm going to go around the sort of screen in how I see it, which probably is completely different from everybody else. So it will be a shock to whoever I asked to introduce themselves. David, you are at the top of my screen. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experiences of Becker muscular dystrophy, if I may.
Yeah, no problem. I need to really learn how to keep this short because I've had a pretty wild life and I need to learn how to shorten it. But basically, I'm 35 years old. And I was diagnosed with Becker last year in July at 34 years ago, 34 years old. Before that, I had no inkling that I had anything wrong with me. Obviously, now I've got my diagnosis. There's some obvious signs from my past that I probably should have raised some questions, but there was never anything found. There was no family history, so it's quite a rare thing. And I think I grew up in the army, so my dad was a staff sergeant. So I think when doctors told me, no, nothing's wrong with you, when I did address some leg problems at high school, I just took their word for it because I was taught not to fight authority. So in that time, I was living in Glasgow. I've worked in the motor trade for 17 years at that point, as like a parts advisor, service advisor, mechanics in trucks and cars. So I've had quite an active life in my job. And then around my job, because I hated PE at high school, I used to skive the lessons and learn how to play guitar, which thankfully paid off now because I've had a pretty successful career in recording music for TV, touring the world with bands, solo career. And then just recently in August, put together an album about my diagnosis, which was #1 in the UK blues charts and #2 in America. And I also got to include my friend Joe Logue, who was making the statement about being 40 and getting his genetic report, that he lived near me in Glasgow. I found him on social media like a few days after my diagnosis because it was quite a shock. And we became good friends. So we recorded a song together where I play the guitar, he does one of his poems, and it's a beautiful piece of music. So I'm really proud of that. And then following on from that, within a month of diagnosis, I was at the John Walton Centre in Newcastle because we'd Googled like crazy, found that there was a drug trial, and I was on it. So within a month of, hearing that I had a diagnosis and even knowing about Becker, I was in Newcastle. And currently, I now live in Newcastle because I moved. We sold our house and we're now buying a house in Newcastle because I just thought, I'm part of the trial. I want to do everything I can for the research and help. There's probably loads of other things I've missed, but I don't want to keep it too long. But that's a snapshot of it.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Thanks for sharing all of that. And whilst it's fantastic you've moved, everyone doesn't have to move to Newcastle. Not that I've got anything against Newcastle either. Oh my God, I'm going to move on to the next person before I say something terrible. Keith, can I introduce you next? You and David know one another, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, we met recently. Yeah, we met in Amsterdam actually, but it was to do with BMD, so it wasn't anything to do with partying. Yeah, so I'm the father of Henry, who's diagnosed with Becker Muscular Dystrophy. I've made a few notes so I don't miss anything, but he was diagnosed age 3.5, and he's 7.5 now. He'll be 8 in February. So we had a lot of concerns since birth. mainly not around anything to do with muscle or muscle wasting or weakness or anything like that. It was to do with concerns around his behaviour, particularly sort of sensory processing issues, things to do with clothes and just quite challenging behaviour sometimes. And that was pretty much since birth all the way up to his age 3.5. We were in touch with a paediatrician, or assigned to a paediatrician who was they were reluctant really to do any genetic testing, but my wife was really persistent, and they eventually agreed to genetic testing. So we were called in like September of 2020 when COVID was still on, so it was all socially distanced and stuff like that. So we were given the diagnosis, and unfortunately, it wasn't a great experience really. So the chap who delivered it, I'm not blaming him or anything, but he obviously said that there was an incidental finding of Becker Muscular Dystrophy, and you hear those words and you immediately think the worst, don't you? And he said there was no real link with the behavioural stuff. So we were sent away with this new diagnosis of Becker Muscular Dystrophy, and finding all the horror stories and stuff like that on the internet, and really going down quite a dark hole, and then still having the behavioural things that we didn't think had been addressed. But then we were assigned to the Newcastle muscle team, and Michaela and Pietro and the brilliant guys there, and obviously we've subsequently found out, and see the first talk today was around the brain involvement. So we've subsequently found out that it is linked. He has now got an additional diagnosis of autism, and he struggles with things like English and his English work within school, which I know is can be linked to Becker, and the Bayern studies have established that, I think, or some links with that. He does have a really wonderful team in Newcastle around him, and we're really grateful for that. He's in the GRASP trial, part of the BMD hub. As Michaela said, it's really important to have the natural history as well. So we're really happy to contribute a lot of the data as well, so that we can have more data for people to look at in the future, I suppose. He's actually also on the BMD Hub's website. I think Michaela showed a picture of him earlier, and he's on the leaflet, which he's really pleased about as well. And he was, we were also the family for MD UK in 2023 Christmas appeal, which raised quite a lot of money, which we were quite pleased about. And we've done quite a lot of fundraising stuff for MD UK. I did the Great North Run a couple of times, and other little things have gone on. And I've done a Treat an MD conference last year where I spoke about Henry in Barcelona, and then I was invited to Amsterdam to the Treat an MD BMD education day a few weeks ago, where I met David. So yeah, that's our story.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for that kind of very personal experience of the diagnosis and everything. And various people here seem to be saying they've met you in Amsterdam. I think it's fantastic. The kind of the network, the family that you probably didn't want to have, but that you now have across the world, that is there to
international
support you.
definitely,
and I think that it's great that you are there to support each other, and so that's brilliant. Somebody's just mentioned in the chat about the fact that their diagnosis of BMD or DMD is bad news, is a bad news bomb, and they had the kindest possible delivery of the news possible, the home visit with a consultant, and still the bomb went off. So I mean, I'm not taking away from your experience, Keith, at all, but it's horrid, and so that's a moment of
I would just add that I got my diagnosis via a phone call at work.
Oh, crikey. Okay, that's not. Yeah.
So it was like a grenade went off, because I stupidly went back into the garage and Googled Becker Muscular Dystrophy, and the first thing that comes up on like the NHS website is life expectancy's 40 or something like that. So it was quite a shock, but that seems like a lovely way to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you both. I mean, I think that's great, and do keep an eye on the chat, because there's some really lovely comments there, I think. And as someone mentions here, it's the mental health implications of having the condition and the diagnosis and everything that goes with that are just not talked about enough. And I think that's very true of Becker. I think it's very true of a number of conditions, which is something that we're trying to help with across the piece. And I know that other patient groups are very much into this area as well. Sarah, I'm going to come to you next. If you can talk a little bit about how you work with people who live with Becker muscular dystrophy, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Sarah and I'm a paediatric physiotherapist at Sheffield Children's Hospital. So I work in the neuromuscular team and part of the multidisciplinary team, and most children and parents of those that have a diagnosis of Becker muscular dystrophy would meet me when they come to see the consultant, and alongside the consultant is myself or one of my physiotherapy colleagues, as well as the care advisor and nursing team. So we have a multidisciplinary clinic, and during that time, the child would do some work with me, and I would look at testing muscle strength as well as functional skills. So those physical skills, getting off the floor, running, jumping, climbing stairs, depending on the age. So that's what would happen when we meet in clinic. Often with some of the children that have very mild or no muscle weakness at their age, that might be the end of it, and they leave clinic and I've just written a few numbers on a piece of paper, and then we'd see them the following year. But other children that do present with some weakness, I might be offering advice around exercises and stretches, potentially if there's some muscle tightness as well. So it's really variable because, like we've discussed today, the variability of Becker's, the type of input that you would receive from myself or one of my physio colleagues when you come to clinic. I see a large part of my role as well as, we're kind of on the lookout for any other areas we can help with physiotherapy, because it's quite natural, for instance, for boys as they reach teenage years and suddenly shoot up inches overnight, that their posture might become a little poor. And so as physios, we can kind of get in there early to try and give some advice about those areas, because we know that that child also has a muscle problem, and if we can nip things in the bud, that's great. So that'd be part of my role. We offer education for schools, and sometimes families might ask us to have a word with the school for any of the muscle conditions we see. So our role is really quite varied. Sometimes with Becker's it is absolutely minimal, and we don't go in heavy-handed and we don't do more than we need to. So we're not going to give a load of exercises to a child that is having great fun on their bike every day, doing everything that they want to, but we're there for people as we need them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And Katie, presumably you'll do something similar for the adult population.
Yeah, so my name's Katie Nevin. I'm an adult specialist physiotherapist in neuromuscular conditions, and Becker muscular dystrophy being one of the conditions that I cover. Hospital, different trust, but still in Sheffield. So slightly different role really with adult services. We have obviously larger populations of patients, so it's harder sometimes to access the care as much, but I work with part of the neuromuscular team, and again we have care advisors, specialist nurses, the consultant, and myself and another colleague as physios. We would aim to try and see the patients as and when they require. So again, I think it's different a little bit from children's services, who are more closely monitored because they're growing more. The changes are a little bit more sudden because they're growing and developing. Definitely with our service, adults wise, I have an open door policy. So patients will contact me as and when they might need things, whether that's yearly, whether that's every 2-3 years. And my role really, I feel, is to help the adult patients kind of self-manage their condition as much as possible, give them the advice and support. The changes aren't as quick as they might be in children's services, but definitely to be that support network if things become more challenging. And whether that's around just understanding their condition, having support at work, and myself and the care advisor might interact with work and universities to make sure they understand the conditions and help, even whether it's equipment in the home. And making sure if they want to exercise and try and keep fit and healthy, they know the safest ways to do that. So I see that as a real key role. Being a physio, I want to keep people as fit and active as possible, but there's a few things we just have to maybe be a little bit more cautious of with Becker. But I want to keep people, you know, as mobile for as long as possible, you know, and living their lives. And that's where I see my role as a physio really in adult services. So every team around the country might be slightly different in what they can offer. But I understand it's harder in adult services to get as much input. And I think that's sometimes a common theme around the country, really.
I think it is, very, very sadly. There are some questions around physio, and there was a point around child's behaviour. But before we get to those, and there are some really other great questions, Konstantinos, you have been waiting in the corner of my screen so patiently for so long. Please talk to us.
Hello, everyone. Many thanks for having me here. It's a lovely group. My name is Savvatis. I'm an adult cardiologist, and I work in London. I've got a dual role, sitting place really in St. Bartholomew's Hospital, but also at the University College London Hospitals, which involves the National Hospital for Neurology. And my specialist interest really is that of genetic heart muscle conditions, and that involves patients with neuromuscular conditions and the cardiac involvement. I mean, we've heard a lot about the involvement in Becker's muscular dystrophy. I think everything is really very, very helpful what we've heard today. And I think the most important thing that we need to stress is that there is a huge variability. The heart is a muscle, and it can be affected in Becker muscular dystrophy, and is really one of the I suppose most important things that we look after. In specific in individuals with dystrophinopathy, but also in specifically in Becker muscular dystrophies, and that involves asymptomatic patients who have absolutely no cardiac involvement up to patients with more advanced cardiac involvement, and we generally tend to individualize, especially with Becker's muscular dystrophy, and because of the variability in the heart involvement. We tend to individualize how frequently we see the patient, and how often and what type of investigations we do. But generally, we tend to see at least once a year our patients and perform an ECG and echocardiogram. Quite often, we may, especially in the beginning, to see a cardiac MRI, to have a cardiac MRI for a baseline and potentially some early findings of cardiac conditions. And I think the other important point is that there is treatment for the cardiac involvement in Becker muscular dystrophy. We have quite a few medication, and the list of drugs increases, thankfully. And we try to be as early as we can and as aggressive as we can without treatment, because we do know this is quite important. It does improve the outcomes. It does improve the cardiac function, and we tend to press as much as we can with those. I think that's from my side.
Thank you so much. And just picking up on some of the questions around some of the exercise and hydrotherapy, and Katie, I think these were some questions sort of for you around programs for people with Becker to sort of help maintain strength. Do those exist? Do you have them? Are there, again, is that something they should go to their specialist physio for?
Yeah, so I think because everybody is unique in how they present, and everybody has different areas that are maybe stronger or weaker. So it's hard to kind of give a one size fits all kind of program that will do for everybody. Definitely, we want to try and keep people as fit and healthy and active, and we know the benefits of exercise with, mental health and sleep and reducing diabetes and weight and everything like that. So I think it is an important element. I would recommend that people would go to their local or their regional centres to ask for these specialist exercise programs or kind of more guidance on what to do and what not to do. So sometimes stretching programs are really key in preventing anything tightening up or cramps into legs and hands. And so they definitely help. Gentle exercises such as like Pilates exercises are fantastic for helping maintain that core control. And that's often less affected with Becker, kind of our core tummy muscles. So that can really help kind of give us a solid base and foundation. We've got to be careful with weights because we don't want to over kind of push the muscles because, they're already a little bit more fragile. So we've got to be careful with any weightlifting. And again, your physio will be able to guide you with that. And same with aerobic. So that exercise, that fitness, getting out of breath, we must make sure that cardiologists are happy. So I often will link in with the cardiology team, checking people if they have pacemakers, making sure what kind of max heart rate the cardiologist wants them to work at. So we've got to be really careful around that aerobic work. But everything is possible. We definitely need to check in with the medical teams though and have that one-to-one. I'd love to say there was like a straightforward answer or like I could send you to this, but unfortunately it is not that simple really. But this is why, to link in with the local teams, adults, is people trip and fall and break bones, and that overcomplicates everything. So somebody who was walking and really active, one little stumble and we've got a broken ankle, and it just causes a lot more drama, and the bone will heal, but sometimes it means that we lose that good muscle strength that we have. So one of my biggest elements as an adult physio is trying to tell people about the risks of falls and trying to prevent that. So whether it's splints and orthotics that we can send to, walking aids, equipment at home, pacing advice, so all those things are so important because as an adult, as we get older, the biggest thing that kind of comes up is falls. So again, that's quite an important aspect as the Becker patients get older and come through from children's services.
Thank you. Someone mentioned in the question before we met about their partner keeps getting discharged from physiotherapy as they say they're unable to help him further. Feel like he should be having some sort of ongoing physio or at least ongoing contact. Can you advise on that?
Yeah, it's so difficult in adult services. Our service in Sheffield has over 1,500 patients, and there's me and my colleague who are part-time. So there's basically one person for the whole of South Yorkshire who specialise in neuromuscular, and that tends to be quite common throughout the country. So we're here for that advice and support. The local teams, unfortunately, in adult world, your local neurology team will offer a block of physio treatment, and that will be centered around a goal or something that you would like to achieve, and it often runs for a few weeks or a few months depending on what that goal is. And once that has been achieved, they will often discharge you. So they're the local neuro teams. And I think part of it is the local neuro teams have to see everything. So the strokes, the Parkinson's, the MSs, they've got a huge variety and definitely huge waiting lists and lots of kind of need. So often they will treat you for that section and then unfortunately discharge you. Hopefully most of the neuro centres in the neuromuscular centres, like myself, will offer, so I will try and see patients on a yearly basis, but if they need me before then, they can come in and out, and I often will offer like an open door kind of referral, because some people need a little bit more than others, but it is really difficult in adult. I think if you have the luxury to have private physio, then that's something else that's offered, you will get more out of it. There's a few centres across the UK. So there's the Winsford Centre in Cheshire, and then there's one further down in Coventry, which again will offer more ongoing physiotherapy and input, but they're only useful if you live in those areas. And you can actually go to them and access them. So I totally appreciate it's really difficult, and I think it just comes, we would love to do more. I would love to see all my patients every month and do a full gym exercise program. It would be my dream, but there is just not enough of me, not enough funding in the NHS, not enough time. So yeah, I can totally, it's really difficult. And as a physio, it really pulls on my heartstrings, because you always want to do more, but I have to spread myself so thinly, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I understand. You mentioned falls before, and someone here is saying that their son is 190 centimeters tall, which is very tall, and is frustrated. He falls often. Are there strategies to kind of cope or advise him, because he can't get back onto his feet himself?
Yeah, really, really big problem with my adult patients. And obviously falls, we don't want to be breaking bones, and we don't want a head injury or anything. There's other things that can happen if we do have a fall. So we want to kind of limit those risks. Like I said before, definitely walking aid equipment, whether it's just a crutch. Lots of my patients find that just having an arm crutch helps. It might just be one. People often will think, oh, they're, out and about, they might have a sports injury or a bit of a sprained ankle, but actually, it really helps you. And it often gives people like a wider berth of you as well when they're walking down the street. If you've got a crutch, people are less likely to catch you in an awkward way and knock you off balance. Definitely orthotic equipment. Lots of my Becker patients will struggle lifting their feet because they have weakness around their ankles, or they are weak around their hip flexors, so they don't lift their feet as much. So there's lots of orthotic devices which are great, and it might be you just need to wear them when out and about, or you wear them all the time. Equipment around the house, and I would do lots of looking at, is there any patterns to why you fall? Often it's fatigue related. So again, lots of education work around how much you're doing in the day. Are you pushing it to that nth degree? And that's what often causes the falls. Pacing, resting in the day, giving you time for your muscles to kind of get a little bit more energy. So lots of advice around pacing and fatigue is really important with adults. And I know MD UK have a great fatigue booklet, which is quite substantial, but it has lots of it. It has lots of really, really good tips of how to manage your fatigue. So that's a great resource that I direct patients to.
Brilliant, thank you. Konstantinos, there's a question here about drugs for the heart, that someone's tried a couple of drugs for treating cardiac issues. One made them depressed and the other slowed them down too much. And the last one said it relaxes the muscle, which they didn't feel was great for BMD. I appreciate you can't give individual advice, but is there any generic advice?
No, these are absolutely great questions, because we face them quite often. I'll start with the classes of medication that we're using for heart failure in BMD are four really. So what we call the RAS inhibitors, the ACE inhibitors. So the typical example would be ramipril or perindopril here. Then there's a second one, which is called the Pleranol. These are the aldosterone blockers. And then there's the beta blockers. And the newest one is the dapagliflozin, which is a diabetes medication, but actually proven to be very, very helpful in reduced systolic function, so pumping function. Now, ideally, we want our patients to be on all of them. That is a bit of individualized, as I said, depend on how much cardiac involvement there is. What are the symptoms clearly out of that, and how much of those medications can be tolerated. And clearly, a lot of those medications will reduce the blood pressure. They may have a secondary a side effect of fatigue potential, especially the beta blockers. They can do that as well. So it has to be individualized. Clearly, what we want to do is improve the outcome, get all the benefits for longevity and clearly symptomatic improvement. But what we don't want to do is make symptoms worse and take away the quality of life that the person has. And sometimes it is a try and error way of balance. Try different medications in the same class with different doses, different times throughout the day to take them. And I think for some medication, the evidence is much stronger than for others. For instance, beta blockers probably do not have as strong an evidence as ACE inhibitors. So we would prioritize using those that actually have a good evidence base rather than the ones that don't and potentially may give you more side effects. So I think these are the thoughts that we generally discuss in clinic, but quite often the blood pressure may be low. Quite a lot of individuals with Becker muscular dystrophy otherwise would have low blood pressure. So that limits us a bit in terms of what medication and how we use them. But what we don't want to do is really limit the quality of life and actually give patients worse symptoms than they have before. So I think that's an important reason of discussion every time.
Thank you. And linked to that, and I'll bring Michaela in a second, is there are a couple of questions here about carriers of the genetic mutation for BMD. Do you find that there are carriers who have cardiac problems, Konstantinos, and then Michaela, I'll come to you more generally about other symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about carriers, I presume female carriers. Or
yeah.
I suspect so. The answer is the data is going to be even less than with the Duchenne. So we don't really have, and that's why the natural history and capturing as much as we can is going to be quite helpful. But we think that the cardiac involvement in BMD care is probably going to be less than what we see in the Duchenne. And in Duchenne, it's about 10-15% of the female carriers that may express and have a cardiomyopathy. Clearly, even in those cases, we would do recommend ongoing screening, and that involves a relatively infrequent every 5 years, depending on whether there is cardiac involvement. But I think we have to recommend screening for carriers, BMD mutations as well. And again, going back to all that variance and variability in expression, quite often what we do find is a very significant discrepancy between the cardiac and the muscular involvement. So quite often people will have even no cardiac, no muscular involvement, but they will have a significant cardiomyopathy. And that depends on where the mutation is, how the mutation is, and that's why it's quite important actually to screen and the cardiac status of all patients.
Thank you. And Michaela, more broadly, are there other sort of muscle problems and potentially, I suppose, cognitive problems as well?
So yes, it's been reported in female carrying a change in the DMD gene has been reported that they can manifest either with the isolated cardiomyopathy, so a heart problem itself, and this probably is the most frequent symptoms in a way or presentation in females. There are also cases that present with some cognitive or learning or behavioral issues, similar to what we've seen in affected males, as well as some muscle symptoms. For the muscle symptoms, quite often are mild and unspecific, so they might report some fatigability, some muscle cramps or aches, which is very difficult, especially when a female carrier presents at the age of 50, 60, they have a little bit of aches, and how much is the other factor and how much is the fact that they are a carrier. But there are also cases where they have reported of female carriers that actually present with symptoms, muscle symptom and muscle weakness that is very similar to what we see in males. How frequently this happens is really unclear. There are no very large studies to investigate this, but probably are more than what clinicians are used to consider. So my advice is always say that the carrier, as I mentioned, at the time of the diagnosis in a member of the family, all the females should be tested for carrier in view of the potential risk to pass the condition to their children. Once the carrier is confirmed, the most important thing is that are referred for their cardiac surveillance, and that should happen in all cases. We are encouraging to test also for muscle symptoms or behavioral symptoms, but if a carrier experience any muscle symptom, to go back to be seen by a neurologist for a full assessment. I just wanted to mention that we are hopefully soon launch a a survey specifically for carrier of Becker and Duchenne muscular dystrophy to really better understand these aspects and which kind of symptoms carrier can experience both in their childhood and in adulthood. So we'll disseminate the survey also through Muscular Dystrophy UK. So anyone who would like to contribute to this piece of research would be very appreciated.
Fantastic, thank you. And so talking about symptoms, but this is more for, I guess, people with the condition rather than carriers. Somebody has asked if there are sort of standard symptoms to look out for, I guess more childhood. So this person says as a child, he used to walk on his tiptoes and have big calf muscles. Are these typical symptoms?
I have to say these are typical symptoms, so it's very difficult to say there is anything to expect. So common symptoms at onset and specifically in childhood, but at any age, is what you say are children that might have a little bit of motor development delay. So they might not start walking until the age of 18 months, 20 months. Quite often is not significant, and that is why it's not picked up by healthcare professionals or health visitors or GPs. They might have some speech development delay, similar to what we report in Duchenne, but it can also be in Becker or behavioral problem, as described at the beginning of this webinar. From a muscle point of view, are often children that tend to fall more often, are a little bit more clumsy or more lazy than their peers, and quite often is walking on the tiptoes and have a big, large calves is a typical symptoms of Becker muscular dystrophy. More commonly than in a more severe form of Duchenne, Becker children quite often complain of pain and cramps. And these can be sometimes the major issues in their childhood. In adults, quite often the condition presents more clearly with weakness or difficulty in getting up from the floor, difficult with the stairs, or difficult with running. But again, cramps and aches can be a typical presentation.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you. And sort of picking up on that theme, and I know that Keith, you've been talking, thank you to somebody sort of in the chat, but also bring it out into the discussion that sort of, oh, your son's just lazy kind of thing that people are sort of finding with behavioural problems and what have you in school, and people getting the challenges of getting diagnoses for the autism and ADHD or the ECHP, which now I've forgotten what that stands for. It's education something. Keith, you'll be able to fill those gaps in for me in a second. There are also some, I think, some resources on the MD UK website. So again, if you're having trouble, do contact our info line, because they may be able to give you some top tips and specific questions, pointed questions that you may be able to ask at certain points in the discourse, in the conversations that you have with schools and or others and care advisors that might be able to help you. So please do reach out to us. But Keith, I don't know whether you wanted to mention anything around that.
Yeah, just so I forgot to mention when I spoke actually about the Education, Health and Care Plan, which is like a legal document that schools have to follow around different elements of care. We had ours declined, what, 3 or 4 weeks ago, but we appealed it with support from Michaela's team. And just this morning, actually, we got it back that they had agreed to it now, and that they'll put that in place. So that's really, really crucial for us that we've got that in place. Not necessarily for the muscle involvement at the moment, and we're hoping he's going to have a mild sort of muscle involvement anyway because of his deletion. It just means that we can get that support in place for him now, and that legally it's a legal document now that says there's a link between his Becker and his behavioural problems and his academic. He's really behind academically with his English, as I said, and we can really start to address that now. And the school and other professionals have got an obligation now legally to meet that EHCP. So that was massive for us, really, that we've got that support in place for him, and that was the least we could do for him, really, and get that going for him.
But it sounds like it was a real kind of struggle for you. So yeah,
it's sadly for I work in sort of young people's services for a local council as well, and sadly I know that getting any sort of diagnosis is a real slog. It's a real marathon. I think the waiting list for autism in Teesside, where I live, is 36 months, something like that. ADHD is 36 months. It's a real slog, and my wife, as I said in the comments, I don't know if people saw, she actually went to our MP. He's actually left now after the new election, but he really helped us, and he got in touch with clinical directors at North Tees Hospital and stuff like that, and we were getting rang by the top people at the hospital and stuff like that. But I do appreciate that that wouldn't be an option for everyone. As I said, you know, some MPs are probably more proactive than others.
Yeah.
But yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't
No.
have to contact your MP to get a diagnosis for your little boy or yeah. But yeah, it's a real marathon and a real slog, and yeah, I think everything's really pushed and tight within health services in it. So
yeah,
is what it is.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I mean, yeah, well, and congratulations on you know, winning that fight, this phase of it. So yeah, that's good news in a
absolutely,
in a way. Yeah,
a good outcome in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Changing gears a little, and we've got so many questions coming in, and I really apologize if we don't get to them all, because I'm getting mesmerized by them all. It's brilliant. We've got a really good conversation going on. Going back to the carriers question, somebody's been told that they're not a carrier but feel they've got a lot of the symptoms. Is it worth being checked again? I guess, Michaela, that's for you.
I've just replied, and hopefully clearly enough. But I think that it depends a little bit. So if the carrier has been excluded through genetic testing, so you have a genetic testing to confirm that you do not carry a fault in the dystrophin gene, I do not think that is important to go back to the testing, but it's more to go back to your GP and exclude other causes of your symptoms. However, I don't want to assume anything. If you have not had a genetic testing, yes, this must be organized. So the reason why I'm saying that is in inpatient, quite often the first test that we do is the CK or creatine kinase that are elevated in the large majority in all patients with Becker muscular dystrophy. Carriers can have a normal CK but still carry the genetic variant.
Fantastic, thank you. And talking of genetic variants, at what age should a child be tested if a parent has BMD? We were told 18. Is that correct?
I just want to make a little bit of clarification about the genetics, because obviously Becker muscular dystrophy is what we call an X-linked condition, which means that the dystrophin gene is on your X chromosome. Female has 2 X chromosomes, and male has 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. So that is the reason why males are affected and females usually are not affected. So males only have 1 X chromosome. So if that X chromosome has the fault, they will present with Becker muscular dystrophy. Female has a 2 X chromosome, and it's complex, but just to simplify, if one of the 2 is faulty, the other one make the job. It's a simplification, so don't take me by letter, but it's a simplification of the concept. So if a male has a Becker muscular dystrophy, he will not, his sons will not have the condition. And that is because in order to have a son, so a son and not a daughter, they will pass the Y chromosome, which does not have a genetic fault. However, all the daughters of an affected man will be automatically carriers of the condition. So the reason why we advocate for genetic testing after the age of 18 is because as the daughter need to be able to make their own decision about how can they manage the information about being a carrier, but they will be what we call obligated carriers, if it makes sense. So it's a little bit different with Duchenne, but with Becker, that is the.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Michaela.
Sorry, can I just say one to conclude, just to make it to all the option that if a mom has been tested as a carrier, the sons can be tested at any age, especially if they present symptoms, but because of their potential risk of a heart problem in the absence of muscle symptoms, they can be tested earlier than the age of 18. For female, they will wait until the age of 16 or 18 in order to allow them to make that decision. I can try to summarize that in a minute. It's a little bit complex, but depend on the situation.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. I'm going to switch gears. Oh, sorry, Michaela. This is another one for you, I suspect. It's about the EDG 5506. So this is an experimental still treatment that is being developed by a company. And is this going to improve motor function and we'll be able to keep mobility throughout life? Is that the aim with that treatment?
So as you emphasize, this is an experimental drug. So the reality is it is a drug that is currently tested in a clinical trials, and therefore we do not know the effect of the drug. The clinical trials is what we call a phase 2 clinical trial or 2 to 3 clinical trial, which means that the trial aim to answer exactly that question. Does this drug make a difference in slow down the progression or improve the muscle strength and function in patients with Becker muscular dystrophy, but also is this drug safe for patients with Becker muscular dystrophy? So these are the two questions that the trial will need to answer. If we think about the drug itself, the drug, yes, targets, so want to reach the skeletal muscle, so the muscle of the legs and the arms, and the aim of the drug is to change the natural course of the disease in terms of muscle strength and function. I'm very careful because we need to think that this drug potentially aims to improve the muscle strength and function. But as for any drug, also this drug, once it's given, is never aimed to repair the muscle that has been already lost because the patient has Becker muscular dystrophy. So a positive outcome of the study is even if the drug slows down the natural progression of muscle weakness and not necessarily improve. So far, we do not have any drug, either in Duchenne or Becker muscular dystrophy, that improve muscle strength and function. Mm-hmm. Most of the aim is more to slow down the deterioration.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Couple of questions for Konstantinos, and David, I'll come to you in a second just for any reflections you may have had on the discussion that's been going on so far. Konstantinos, there's a couple of questions around, again, heart medications and screening. So somebody is saying that their husband has a diagnosis of Becker muscular dystrophy and has heart screening. Their daughter is a carrier who's 13 years old. Should or would heart screening start that young?
So how old is the daughter?
The daughter is 13.
I mean, I think we have to screen. It's a recommendation that we don't quite know is the answer what the cardiac phenotype will be and how significant the cardiac involvement may be. I mean, the recommendation would be to do a baseline screening even at that age. So we'll probably have go on to have a cardiac MRI if she's able to do that, and then if that is completely normal, then she can come back in 5 years and have another sort of scan. So this is our current recommendation. So I wouldn't really use the age to limit screening because we know this is we don't have quite as much information that and there's always a very, very, very high variability. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes.
And one thing I realized is that I forgot to answer to Tom about the relaxation medication before. So I think this is just a bit of an unlucky description for the medication. I mean, usually what we do describe some of those medications that do affect how stiff the heart becomes, and usually by reducing the scarring in the heart. And that's quite often we will describe it as improving the relaxation, but actually it doesn't really reduce the pumping function or the systolic function of the heart. So we it does affect how the heart relaxes, and that eventually will be a good thing as well, but doesn't really reduce the pumping function.
Thank you. That's really helpful clarification. There was a question about whether angina is a common sort of feature of people with Becker muscular dystrophy. Yeah,
I think angina is one of it's a relatively non-specific symptom. Let's put it like what would you describe as angina is a chest pain essentially, and the most common cause of angina is blockages in the arteries around the heart, which is independent from Becker's muscular dystrophy? So the answer is no, it shouldn't be a common sign of or a common symptom of Becker's muscular dystrophy. But quite often, patients with Becker muscular dystrophy may perceive chest pain either because the heart function is quite reduced, or they may have underlying lung and respiratory muscle, or it may be muscular, and quite often we may just describe as angina. And clearly, the other thing to keep in mind is that it may have a person may also have blockages in their arteries, especially if the diagnosis and the person affected maybe later on in life, where other cardiovascular risk factors may come into play as well. So the answer is no, it's not a typical one, but we shouldn't really ignore it, and we should always talk to our doctor about it.
Thank you. There'll be a question for the physios in a second, but David, I just wanted to bring you into the conversation, just if there's any sort of reflection you've had so far about what's been discussed.
Yeah, I mean, I know Michaela pretty well, so I know most of what's happening, and I'm on that drug trial. I think for me, it's different because I've only known a short time, so I've had to learn very quickly, and I'm still learning. I still don't know much, but I'm trying to deal with my way that Becker's affected me, essentially, which I think, looking at myself now, it's quite obvious that there was problems, but you know, you don't see it when you're told for 34 years you're fit and healthy. So it's been quite a retraining of my brain. But I think in particular, MD UK started a WhatsApp group chat for I think it started for just anyone with muscular dystrophy, but it soon probably just got out of control. So there's now individual chats. So we've got a BMD chat for people in the UK, which people are still getting added to it. And that's been really great to talk to others with it, some that are newly diagnosed, some that have loads of experience. Not to mention on social media, that's how I found Joe in Glasgow, who has been writing about it for a very long time and doing articles and all sorts of creative things with it as well. So that was a really good piece of knowledge, because there wasn't really a lot of information that you could really bank on when I was looking. And obviously I know experts can't really say much because they need to know your individual needs, and it varies so different to how your lifestyle is, how the disease affects you. And then in Amsterdam, actually meeting face to face either the people from the BMD chat or others, I think that's been the biggest help for me. And then obviously I was on the drug trial a month after my diagnosis, so I think in some way, just the way I am, I felt like I just needed to take control of it, because getting a phone call and getting told there's no treatment, there's nothing you can do, don't lift heavy objects, and I'm in a car garage thinking, right, well, that undermines everything I've been doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't work in the motor trade anymore. Thankfully, it's given me the kick to do music full time, which has been great, and try and do something to raise awareness about the condition and use my platform to help and meet others. But I would say since the drug trial, I've just taken a really big look at myself in terms of what am I eating. So since December, me and my partner have been trying to stick to a non-ultra processed food, which is quite difficult to do. But doing that, obviously I don't live in a tenement flat up a staircase anymore. We're in a bungalow. So that's taken away one problem that I really suffer with. I walk with a walking aid most of the time. Sometimes I get annoyed with it because people just stare at me because they look at me and think, why has this guy got stick? And you can see them trying to work it out. I always think that I should have like a help for heroes, or so I look like a wounded soldier or something, because it would just make it easier for people to not have to stare. And then I think as well, trying to get out and exercise as much as I can. Obviously the physio that I deal with through the trial, Emma, that's at Newcastle, has been brilliant in giving me so much information. And also just trying things and being honest with my partner and really just telling her every day, how do I feel? How's this? You know, are things bothering me? You know, we tried hydrotherapy right away. We found that there was a pool in Glasgow that had just been built. You could rent it out. That was amazing because it made me feel like I was back to being a kid, where I could, you know, crouch down and stand up. You were just weightless. And I've just started playing wheelchair rugby because I was told you might need to be in a wheelchair, and the idea of using a wheelchair after never really encountering one, and it's just a weird concept. So I thought, well, if I would go to a group setting that's a team, it's a bit more fun. And I've loved it. And it's also something physical that I probably wouldn't have done if that didn't push me. So I think all those aspects, on top of being on the drug and having that sense of duty, almost feeling like I'm one of a very small number that can take part, so I should take part. And yeah, I think it's just really helped. But mainly I would say it's speaking to others with Becker has been the biggest help. I mean, I think the Amsterdam event ended probably about 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock maybe. And then me and a few others, I think even Keith, chatted in the restaurant outside until about 11 o'clock at night, and there were probably still more that we could have talked about. So I think the more that those things could happen, that would probably be a good use as well. Just to get more Becker patients together talking, because I've found it really interesting, especially people that have known a hell of a lot longer than me.
Sure.
To get sped up, and they've found their own ways, but you can take from that what you will. So
yeah, absolutely. I think learning life hacks from one another
definitely
is a really great way forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you,
No
David. I've got a couple of questions here. So for the physios, can you strengthen your muscles that are already weakened? Can you use exercise to do that? Katie, and then I'll come to you, Sarah.
Okay, I'll do it from an adult point of view.
Sure.
So I get asked this quite a lot. It's a tricky one. What I would normally advise my patients is the areas that are already weakened have been affected most by your Becker, and therefore it is very unlikely that they would re-strengthen up again. For me as a physio, I would rather you spend your energy and your time strengthening up the less affected parts of you. So I feel that's a better use of your energy and your effort as well. So I would want people concentrating more on the unaffected parts. So if legs are weaker, let's work on arm strength. It might be we can do some lighter weights. It might be we play sports like David. That sounds great. Wheelchair rugby is so much fun. It's quite brutal. Well done, you. So just trying to work on the less affected parts is more a better use of your time and your energy, really. Sarah, do you want to say from a...
Yeah, I think very similarly, we would, say unfortunately we can't undo the effects of Becker's with physio, but I talk about optimizing your muscles and getting them in the best condition that they can be. And for children, that's often doing whole body types of exercises. We might offer some really specific advice about specific muscles or stretches, but generally, we're thinking about that active, healthy lifestyle. And while lots of these children say they might hate PE and not want to get involved in sports, it's how can we encourage activity in other ways, in ways that they can enjoy and participate. So really try and foster some really good early healthy habits that they can then lead into adulthood. So about being that healthy, active individual. But that doesn't mean you have to be sporty. It doesn't mean that you have to love PE and be in every sports group and especially if you've got some behavioral and cognitive challenges as well, that becomes even trickier perhaps. But you can still be active in different ways. So strengthening specific muscles sometimes comes into it, but often it's more about that healthy, active lifestyle and optimizing your body's ability to do functional everyday activities.
Yeah, it's got to be something you enjoy, or else you're never going to do it. So for me, with my patients, people might use the pool and swim. I would say necessarily you don't need to be swimming lengths. Doing exercises in water, like an aqua aerobics style, is really great. People might be, there's loads of adaptive bikes now, and definitely around my area, there's like adaptive cycle clubs. So if your legs are more affected, there's hand bikes, there's like duo bikes where you can have a partner and therefore the effort is a little bit less for legs. Like I said, there's loads of sport clubs. So whether it's wheelchair rugby, we have sled hockey, which is like ice hockey on sleds over here. There's boccia, which is like an adaptation of bowls. So I think, meeting people and getting in and do something you enjoy. And I know there's lots of pop-up like seated exercise classes that run around. So whether it's seated Pilates, sitting yoga, seated strengthening classes, which are a little bit more gentle. You don't have to be jumping up and down and on a treadmill. And I think it's got to be something you enjoy, but it's important to build those good foundations, or else, we have to exercise to maintain a healthy body, whether we have Becker or not. It means it for everybody. So I think it's important to maintain that good, healthy, system as a whole.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm now looking at the time and thinking we've got lots and lots of questions and hardly any time. Although I will just mention that Joe has put in the chat, David, that you got him into wheelchair rugby and he's looking forward to kicking your butt at some point in a competition. So watch this space. And somebody also mentioned that they attended the cenotaph in Newport last year in a power chair and people kept saluting them. So they said silver linings. So,
Yeah, I think it would work. So that's good to know. Yeah.
And it's wonderful that people are really sharing their experiences here on the chat. So thank you, everyone. And a few people have asked about the link to the BMD chat. We'll make sure that all of that sort of information is available when we post the video, and we will be in touch with everyone who's been on the call today, and we'll be able to provide links to you for that as well, because I think you are a community that is clearly enjoying interacting with one another, and I think that's brilliant. So thank you for everything that you're saying in the chat. It's been really open with one another. I think that's been brilliant.
I just add that Joe runs a page on Instagram called Sons of Dystrophy. It is obviously open to women as well with muscular dystrophy, but he's also down as Dystrophy Dad. So just for anyone that wants to catch up on things he's written, things he's doing. And then myself, my musician name that's on social media is David and the Devil. But he's got a great resource, and they share stories about other people with muscular dystrophy sort of on a Friday and things. So it's a great introduction to some people that you can find out about.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for that, David. There's a quick question here. Well, probably isn't a quick question, but somebody whose son has been on prednisolone, so that's a steroid, for 20 years, now has osteoporosis, and but they're afraid to stop the steroids. And there's possible ongoing heart and muscle benefit. Is there any advice perhaps you could give Michaela on that?
I have to say it's very difficult, because here we go into individual cases. So
Sure.
Corticosteroids, so prednisone is advised, is part of the standard of care, recommended to every patient with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but there are very little data on the use of corticosteroid in patients with Becker muscular dystrophy. And I always emphasize that let's say the reason why I prescribe corticosteroid is because there is inflammation in the muscle, and corticosteroid reduce the inflammation. And this inflammation is present also in Becker muscular dystrophy, although it's less severe compared to what we see in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. On the other hand, corticosteroid has a lot of side effects, and therefore the balance between pro and cons might be different in patients with Duchenne and Becker. But it's really an individual assessment of pro and cons, and depend of whether the boy has responded to corticosteroid, a part of the osteoporosis, what other side effects. There are treatment and intervention to manage the osteoporosis. So it's really go back to the neuromuscular specialist and discuss about pro and cons. And sometimes there isn't really a right and wrong. And if there are a lot of side effects, you start reducing steroid and see how does it go, and then make that decision.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate it's very difficult to give specific advice on, because you don't know the rest of the circumstances of individuals. Just on a completely changing the subject again note, somebody here is saying that the BMD is the reason that they have the job that they have. They work for an accessibility charity, assessing and writing up experiences of travel as a disabled person, which again, I imagine that's an incredibly challenging job, because we know from the conversations and the stories that we hear from our community and from my colleagues who have disability, that travel is not a straightforward thing when you have a disability. So it's just an amazing thing that you're doing. And if you want to get in touch and share your stories as well with us, please do reach out. That would be fantastic. And yeah, the travel situation for people is not straightforward at all. Quick question again about the drug trial that's going on. So the experimental drug again, the EDG 5506, very quickly, Michaela, is it supposed to help prevent damage by reducing muscle contraction? But then is contraction not important for muscle function? It's a very good
question. Very straightforward, but I try to simplify. So the reason why, so dystrophin is like an elastic that maintain, what I say always is the elasticity of the muscle cells. So it's just that when you contract and relax, it's just that elastic band. In Becker muscular dystrophy, that elastic band is a little bit shorter compared to what we expect. What the Edgewise drug tried to obtain is to maintain the contraction, but without reaching the maximum extension and the minimum. So if I stretch less the muscle but maintain the contraction limited, it's true that I don't reach the maximum strength, but I limit the muscle damage, because the fact that every time that I stretch the cells and contract, this could lead to a damage, and at the end I will lose that muscle cells. So it's just to contain, but it's true, it's a balance. I want to reduce the extreme, but if I completely remove the contraction, then I become weaker. So, but this is the mechanism how the drug aims to work.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And just coming full circle, I noticed that somebody has said that they use a, and I can't pronounce is it Hayes Lupus recumbent bike with electric assist, and they often go for 20-mile bike rides on their own, and they spent 5 weeks this year cycling around the Netherlands, which has a fantastic adaptive cycle networks and cycle opportunities. So I love how this whole conversation has come back to the Netherlands, Hermien, and it's come back to you. So well done, the Netherlands, for having such fantastic infrastructure to, and I suppose a lack of mountains that helps there a little bit.
I was going to say it's really flat, so that makes things very easy.
But I mean, you've capitalized on that in a good way, so I think that's wonderful. I am very mindful of time, and we are just about to finish, but I think I will give the last words to David and to Keith, because let's face it, they are the biggest experts on the call, notwithstanding the fantastic clinical experts that we have here. But I think David and Keith, just a final word from you before we wrap up for the day, and thank you to everyone who has put in questions. It's been great.
Shall I go first?
Why not?
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thank you, Kate, for putting this together. It's absolutely fantastic for the BMD community, and thank you to all the speakers. There is a lot of hope out there. A diagnosis, it can really feel like there's not a lot of hope, and there's such variability with Becker and things like that you know, when you do get in front of the experts, when you get to the muscle teams and stuff like that, then things can look a lot rosier, I think, and there is a lot of hope out there. And as Dave will touch on, you know, he's only found out last year, but he's enrolled on a clinical trial or a second one now, and you know, there is a lot of things in the pipeline in the future where I think that a lot of brilliant breakthroughs will be made, and you know, everyone coming together like this is fantastic, and it does give a lot of hope to everyone.
David, any last thoughts? Thank you, Keith.
Welcome.
Yeah, just the same, that obviously in that first phone call that I had, you know, I was told that there's nothing at the moment, but the science moves very quickly. And then obviously within a month, I'm in Newcastle signing up to this trial. So it just goes to show that things are changing. And then where the BMD hub is now, I mean, it's crazy to know that there was nothing before, and there's not really been a lot. So I'm just glad that, you know, I can be part of this new thing that's happening. And yeah, it's just been overwhelmingly positive. And then also, you know, as a creative person like Joe and us working together, I think doing my music, I've got a new sense of purpose, really. Like, that's really changed things. I think I struggled with depression and even suicide when I was 20, because obviously I was told I was fine, but I was terrible at these things. And I just thought, well, I'm just bad at these things. You know, it was one of those where it's kind of screwed me up for a long time. So I think as well, I'm sort of ready to get the diagnosis in a mental capacity, that me and my partner have just taken it head on and just been proactive in thinking, right, you're going to be in Newcastle all this time, there's things happening, let's just move, let's get to a bungalow, you know, change your surroundings, and then also working on health and things like that. And then now thinking about, because I haven't played live for a very long time, I've just sort of recorded for years, mainly because I have guitars made out of solid steel, so they're quite heavy. So this is like a solid steel custom guitar, but I'm supported by just amazing people in music. In like, you know, the more I talk about it, the more I play, the more I talk about Becker, the more amazing people come into my life that just inspire me to just do more and want to do more. So
fantastic.
Yeah,
that is the perfect way to end a webinar, isn't it, on such a wonderful note. Thank you, David. Thank you, Keith, for being so honest and open with us, sharing some very personal experiences for you and your family. And thank you to everyone who has joined and been participating in the chat. And thank you to all the other panelists. It's been a really great session. I hope it's been useful for people. We will put links in, and I will go back through the questions to make sure that we've kind of covered as much as we can before in any follow-up with you all. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend, everyone.
thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.